Everyone wants the latest version of their favorite camera, and I get it, tech is fun, but what I've noticed is that people seem to pay for these really expensive cameras, then just get whatever cheap kit lens comes with it because the lens is more of an afterthought. So I went through and did some tests to compare a really expensive camera with a cheap lens to a cheaper camera with a really expensive lens to see which one is going to give you the most bang for your buck when it comes to video quality. Today we're starting off with the Sony a7C that used to be $2,000 but has now dropped since the Mark II was recently released. And paired with it is the 28 to 60mm kit lens that you can buy as a package deal with the camera, bringing us to a total of $1,900 now, or $2,300 when I recorded these tests before the price of the a7C dropped. And for our cheaper camera, we have the Sony ZV-E10 paired with the Sony 50mm f1.2 lens for a total of $2,700 for this setup. One of the main reasons I hear people say they want a full frame camera like the a7C was because of the better low light performance. And yes, you will get less noise when comparing a higher ISO setting to an APS-C camera with the same ISO, but with this kit lens set to 60mm, the lowest aperture we can achieve is f5.6, which requires an ISO of 10,000 to be properly exposed in this low light setting. Compare that to the ZV-E10, which has a smaller APS-C sensor, but when paired with the lens that can get all the way down to f1.2 on the aperture, we only need an ISO of 400 to get the same exposure as the a7C in the previous shot. And right off the bat, you can see that the image quality looks way better even though this is a much cheaper camera. We have a sharper image on the ZV-E10 from being able to capture more light. The depth of field is much more shallow, making the subject stand out from the background even more, and the color accuracy is much better at an ISO setting of 400 compared to the 10,000 on the a7C. So having a lens capable of going down to those really low apertures will help even more in uncontrolled low light settings than just simply having a larger sensor, because all the extra light coming in through the lens is going to make your video look even better at that lower ISO setting. And even though buying lights doesn't sound nearly as fun as a new camera or lens, a well-placed light will improve your footage even more with allowing even lower ISO settings and the ability to shape the light around your subject to equalize the quality between the cameras even more. So let me know down in the comments what your current camera and lens setup is, because I'm interested to see how many of y'all have invested in those higher quality lenses. When shooting in the daytime with plenty of light, you aren't going to notice a large difference between the cameras aside from how blurry the background can get because of that shallower depth of field capability of the f1.2 lens. Autofocus system of the a7C is really good, so even with the cheaper lens, you get good autofocus racking between the background and me. The autofocus tracking of the ZV-E10 worked just as well as the a7C as I'm moving closer to the camera. Because of the depth of field being more shallow, it does take a bit longer at times to rack focus from the background to me, but here's where we start to run into some issues with using a cheaper camera with the problem of rolling shutter. As I move around quickly in the frame, you start to see a jello-like look to my head, and that's a problem that isn't nearly as noticeable when using a higher quality camera like the a7C. Here, I'm purposefully inducing rolling shutter on the a7C, and it's definitely there, but it's not something that would be very noticeable if you were simply going to do a quick pan shot or have someone run across the frame. But compared to the ZV-E10, the rolling shutter is much more noticeable, with the entire house looking very wobbly, along with the tree and the pillar in the background noticeably bending in the frame. However, for me, this isn't something that would keep me from getting the cheaper camera, because there are workarounds for this sort of thing. If you know what you're dealing with, then you can manage it just fine, especially when compared to the way better quality you get with that better lens, which brings us to our last comparison in aperture. We saw earlier that the lower aperture let in a lot more light to get a cleaner image in that low light setting, but when you can control the lighting, then you can use the aperture for stylistic purposes to get the depth of field that you want in your shots. With the kit lens on the a7C, you're limited to f5.6 at the higher focal lengths, which doesn't give you a lot of leeway in how blurry you can make the background. You can get down to f4 at the wider focal lengths to get a bit more depth of field, which definitely helps. But when using the ZV-E10 with the 50mm, we can get all the way down to f1.2, making the background extremely blurry. Granted, you may not want your subject to be this isolated with that much blur in the background, but you do have the ability to move up to those higher apertures like f4 or f5.6 like on the kit lens, but you aren't limited to only being able to use those. Something to keep in mind though is that you will get more background blur with the full frame camera than an APS-C camera when shooting at the same aperture setting. setting. The background is noticeably blurrier when both cameras are at f5.6, and that difference becomes even more noticeable when we get all the way down to f1.2. So with all that, I think it's pretty obvious and safe to say that a higher quality lens is going to provide much better video quality for you than getting a higher quality camera. And the f1.2 is a bit overkill in my opinion, and you would get similar results if you went with the Sony 50mm f1.4. It will save you $700 and end up being $2,000 for the total setup. Both these cameras have all the same video features for 4K and Full HD and almost every other feature as well, aside from the A7C giving you the added benefit of the sensor stabilization. But a good lens will continue to last as long as you take care of it and can be used with every new camera you buy. Granted, you continue to buy the same brand that fits that lens mount. And I have a lot of videos on the channel for lens suggestions based on various camera brands and models, so be sure to check that out after this if you don't know what you should get. And once you have those quality lights and lenses and know how to use them well, then you can start looking into better cameras to help improve your shots more and give even more options and video features as you learn more about filmmaking. But learning how to make good looking shots with limited gear is really going to help you get creative and save a lot of money while you learn how big a difference things like framing and lighting make on your videos over just getting better camera gadgets. And of course, being able to afford both the high quality camera and the high quality lens would be ideal, but if I only had to pick one, then I would definitely go with the higher quality lens because it'll last a really long time and provide great quality for you. So if you have any questions on what lens would be best for your camera and your filming situation, then let me know that stuff down in the comments and I'll try to help you out the best I can there. But please hit that like button if this video was helpful for you. Subscribe if you're new for lots more filmmaking tips, all kinds of stuff to help you out. And with that, I'll see you soon.